In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at a major Arctic blast around the 9th, 10th time frame here of the month of November. So this is coming up in a hurry, and it does look to be even more significant than our one that we just had around the Halloween time frame and even lasting into today, Monday the 3rd. We do expect this one to be even more potent, and that's going to mean the coldest temperatures of the season and even potential snowfall for areas in the north central, northwestern, and maybe even the northeastern corner of the nation. Outside of those snowfall chances, we do expect general storms that could also be major moving across the nation as we see an overall more active pattern than we've dealt with throughout a lot of September and October. We do expect an uptick in activity as a whole. So first things first, let's take a look here at the current conditions. We do have a storm system coming on shore there to the northwest where they're seeing showery activity both in the forms of rain and snowfall, dependent on your elevation. We can also see areas throughout Canada, a lot of the highly populated areas of Canada like Toronto, Ottawa, Quebec, Montreal, areas like that. We are seeing a lot of this showery activity roll through, and that does extend into Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York State as well. Then off to the east, we do have a coastal low as well. Most of that activity is offshore by this point. We did see a lot of that last night throughout some of the day yesterday, but it is coming to an end generally, especially for these areas in North Carolina and Virginia that are still seeing it. But in the Northeast, we do still have quite a bit of this heavier activity that still needs to roll through. Let's zoom into some of these areas. First off, these showers in the Northwest that again are generally light to moderate. We do see snowfall in the higher elevations. And as this low kind of rolls onshore, we should generally see more areas deal with more precipitation as time goes on. So I do expect this storm to worsen before it gets better. Looking towards areas of Canada and the northeastern states, waiting for that precipitation. There we go. We do see some of these are actually moderate to heavy at times, especially on the Canada side of things, which is very interesting. And these are kind of just generally rolling from west to east. They do have a little bit of a rotation to them. Kind of climbing towards the northeast as they head further eastward. For most of these areas like Toronto, Cleveland, and even Buffalo, this is coming to an end for the most part, but we do see areas like Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, Syracuse, Albany, and then even into New England where this activity is only getting started and actually going to worsen as the day progresses for some of these further east areas. This coastal low is interesting because it's rather tall. We see it kind of stretched vertically. So we're seeing impacts in North Carolina and Virginia. And as we kind of just look at those are mostly light to moderate, and they are generally moving out. So we are seeing this storm come to an end for these southern areas, as we mentioned. But areas further to the north, we've seen mostly lighter showers here in southern New England, as well as some surrounding states. But for areas like Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Cape Cod, areas like that, we do actually expect this heavier stuff to kind of generally move through over the coming hours. So this is going to get a bit worse for them before it gets completely better and moves out. Let's go ahead and move on now that we've looked at everything going on currently and talk about the model guidance, where we're going to again see a major Arctic blast here coming up, potential snowfall chances, and generally the coldest air of the season so far. And as we take a look here at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here from the National Weather Service, what we see is that they have gone ahead and shifted this. They were originally calling for a warmer pattern overall in the east during this time frame. They've gone ahead and switched back to something that looks a lot cooler over the west, warmer over the west, and neutral to even cooler over the east. I think generally this is being downplayed compared to model guidance. I think that near normal for the 8th through the 12th is a little crazy, especially considering how large scale of a cooldown we are seeing from model guidance. Of course, they could eventually back off on that, and I understand being skeptical as we've seen a couple of these cooldowns back off on the model guidance, but we are, in theory, within 5, 6, 7 days of this occurring, so we're not necessarily in the long range by any means. I am curious to see how everything goes down, but current model projections look a lot worse than this map here, and I would not be surprised, this is as of yesterday to be fair, but I would not be surprised that if we see the outlook for November 3rd and even tomorrow getting the November 4th outlook, of course that's going to push these dates back on the valid dates, Wouldn't be surprised to see this look cooler though, with our most recent update coming out later today after I'm making this video. 8 to 14 day outlook, however, does look near normal for most of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But a lot of this warmth does shift towards the east, which wouldn't surprise me really from what I'm seeing on the models for this 10th through 16th time frame. Time will tell though. We do expect the 10th, 11th at least to be cooler. After that, we do expect us to rebound with somewhat of a warm-up. So I don't have too much of a problem with this 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. And just to kind of go over it, here's how the first 3 days of November has gone. Much cooler than normal in the east, as we predicted. This mostly started around Halloween Day and did extend into the first few days of November. And we could see that a lot of this is due to that warmth that we've seen just really stack like a column out west here. That has been the main driver that has forced this Arctic air into the east, and that's come into full effect. We do expect something like this, maybe even more intense than this, like we mentioned earlier, to happen in the coming days. Looking at the upcoming storminess, we can also kind of get an idea of the jet stream with the flow of these colored lines. We can see generally we're dealing with the trough in the east, ridge in the west. It is fairly soft though, and what I mean by that is it's not digging super far to the south. It's mostly just staying relatively wavy, but up to the north. So we have seen things generally warm in the east here versus what we were seeing again a couple of days ago. We do see this coastal low present. We see the stronger low up to the north causing this precipitation in Canada, primarily in this storm system over the northwest. So let's take this a step further. Let's move towards tomorrow. We see everything in the east pretty much improves for tomorrow afternoon on Tuesday the 4th. We see some lighter showers maybe left over for the northeast, but generally improving. A lot of this precipitation over the northwest has moved further and further inland, past the Rockies, even into the northern plains. Although some of the northwest is still seeing precipitation by tomorrow afternoon on Tuesday the 4th. Wednesday the 5th here, what we're seeing is a stronger storm system beginning to move in for the northwest there. In addition to this, we see generally a warming pattern ahead of it. So likely, typically when these storms move through, they do cool things down a bit. But right before that storm moved in, we saw a warming trend out west. And what we're seeing is a general flow of colder air rushing towards the Great Lakes. We do have a low on the forefront of that pattern, and this will likely try to move along the jet stream. Sometimes we see them move further north than the jet stream and pull the jet stream up. Something like that is typically what you can expect with the track of that storm. But we'll see if this colder air does dive into the east, and it generally does into the northeast, especially by this time frame. When we're looking at the jet stream, it's a little flatter out west, but there is a warm up over the central states, and then again you see that trough into the east. This does become a pretty hefty system. 988 here for midweek. This is between Wednesday and Thursday, the 5th and the 6th. We even see that mountainous interior snowfall for New England, the Adirondacks, Green Mountains, White Mountains, and Maine. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would be probably the biggest snowfall event of the season if we saw this verify, because they haven't seen too much yet. Looking at the northwest, we do see generally high amounts of precipitation still. Again, mountainous snowfall, rainfall in the lower elevations. It's kind of the same thing we've been dealing with here already. Moving towards Thursday afternoon, the 6th, it's the northwest mostly. All the activity, we still see a descending jet stream into the east. Again, it's much flatter out west, but we do see that descent into the east, which is indicative of colder temperatures. And then things get really interesting for Friday here on the 7th. 994 millibar low pressure center between the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay, which is a clear indicator of colder air moving into the east, because typically these lows have cold fronts, and that cold front is going to funnel this colder air right down in to that area the cold front's moving through, which is the central and eastern states here. This effect mostly takes place especially when we have at least a decent push of warmer air out west, because that really leaves the cold air nowhere else to go. Remember, on the east side of a low, there's a warm front. So we know there's warmer air on the east side of the low. If that warmer air is present on the very far west side of the low, so for the west coast here as well, then that colder air is forced to be funneled in between. And we do see that happening here. This is the 7th. Here's the 8th. That cold front moves through. We get a low, again, very close to the northeast where that activity remains. So you might take note the storm flow is generally something like this. They're moving through the northwest, kind of underneath those north central states and then into the northeast here. So we're seeing a very far northern storm track here in the upcoming pattern. Take note that we have a weaker low here in the north central states with some snowfall for the northern plains, like North Dakota, Minnesota here. Definitely seeing some snowfall occurring. For Sunday the 9th here, this is when this really dramatic Arctic blast starts to take place. And you take note, initially, the first thing that jumps off the screen here is this warm column along the west is really, really thin and very, very vertical. And this allows, the further north that warm air goes along the west, this just really causes the imbalance that makes this cold air want to really, really fill into the eastern states here. So we see that rushing in. This is a true Arctic blast, guys. This is coming right from the Arctic region. And even for those of you that believe an Arctic blast should have a certain actual temperature, this one is going to push those boundaries as well. We see snow showers throughout central Canada here from this one, even extending down into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes here. As we keep going towards Monday here on the 10th of November, take it with a grain of salt. It's still about 5-6 days away, but this is textbook ridge in the west, trough in the east, really, really deep diving. This is something you expect to see much more of in the wintertime, not early November, so this is much, much ahead of schedule. We do have some lower pressure off the east coast, but the main one impacting the United States is a low within the trough here located over about northern Ohio, and this is causing some increased snowfall showers for the Great Lakes, even the Ohio Valley, Appalachian Mountain Range there for West Virginia, eastern Kentucky into Pennsylvania and New York. Again, this is a bit ahead of schedule for some of these areas for seeing snowfall, so please take it with a grain of salt because it is a little unusual, but so is the cold that we're seeing, so I don't want to write this off immediately. But we have seen some movement with these models as far as where they want to see snowfall chances within this trough, so it's not a locked-in thing. Interestingly enough, things get more crazy. We see this low transfers to offshore as a 999, which is a fairly intense system. Really, really cold air reaching far to the south here into the Georgia, Carolinas. This is just some of the most intense cold I've seen for early November pop up even on the models, let alone hours 186. So this is a decent range. Still some snowfall ongoing for the Great Lakes, probably lake effect snowfall happening now for Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. But we do see this more synoptic type snowfall happening with our low that is offshore of the Northeast, and this is happening mostly for the Appalachian Mountain Range, so you're thinking Northeast Pennsylvania, kind of East Central West Virginia. These are areas that do see snowfall a lot of times when it's not cold enough for the lower elevations, but we also see this extending into the Catskills of New York, the Berkshires of Massachusetts and Connecticut, even eastern Massachusetts, southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, all seeing some snow showers from this one. And I would argue we're even seeing moderate to heavy snowfall in some of these areas from this coastal low. So this is an interesting scenario that this model is presenting. But the cold has been here every model run for multiple days in a row, so the cold is a high likelihood. The snowfall here in this specific situation is jumping all over the place with the storm, where it's at, how intense it is, who sees snow. So this is by no means locked in, not even close. We actually see a lot of movement, which is a reason to feel a little skeptical about specifics. So this is something we need to spend more time looking into. This is by no means a final kind of idea of what we think is going to happen, not even close. We keep going. That storm system moves further off the northeast. And look at this. I mean, we see New Jersey. We see areas along the Delmarva, New Jersey, southern New England, Long Island, all seeing some snowfall showers from that one. We even see another snow shower event kind of move through at the tail end of that trough on the 12th, 13th. And then we do see a general warm-up. Still storminess moving through the northern states. It's just in the form of rainfall. And then it does look at the end of the model run like we are about to see maybe another Arctic blast. This is hours 354, so vastly different than the one perhaps coming up in 5 or 6 days. But this is evidence that maybe these models want to keep showing this stuff happening throughout mid and late November. So it's an idea, kind of. And we can take away some ability to kind of break down what we think the pattern might look like later on. Again, specifics don't matter too much, like specific date, specific intensity, specific storms, things like that. But to see a model calling for colder patterns to kind of continue, that is a takeaway that you can get value from even in the long range. We do see it lifting up the warmth in the west again. We do see it wanting to force this colder air back in. We do have a low near the Great Lakes, so again, that warm front effect, cold front effect is taking place. So you get yourself kind of in a situation where you have this warmer air rushing up both sides, and then the colder air only has one place to go. So it's a very similar situation, and unfortunately this is the end of the model run, so we don't have anywhere else to go with this, but it kind of presents a similar situation about a week later after that 10th time frame. Now, total precipitation, you could guess the Northwest does phenomenal. Also the North Central into the Northeast, mostly the Midwest into the Northeast, I should say. So we're talking Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, parts of the Mid-Atlantic, and then the Northeast get a especially high amount of precipitation. Really, the Southeast is the only area in the East that I would say is particularly struggling here to get precipitation. But it is good to see the Northeast getting a lot here because they still need more to get back up to average. Looking at the precipitation anomalies here, I'm actually noticing now we don't have the 12Z run. Here we go. This is the 12Z run. Perfect. Northwest is above average. Midwest, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Northeast area here is above average. And then again, the deeper south and the east you go, the more below average it is. The biggest area that's threatening to have a drought in this area would be this deeper south region. And they're actually the ones that see the closest to average to even above average in parts of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So that's another piece of good news here as well. Total snowfall on the European model, as you can probably imagine, is a bit surprising in the east with all the snow showers and even a little bit of a coastal system that wants to get going. This would be truly impressive for November, and I actually want to go ahead and go out there and say that I think that this is very, very likely a high-end type scenario for what's the most likely to occur. So keep that in mind as time goes on, that I expect maybe some of these areas where it's rare to see snowfall in November might see flakes or might see a little bit, but talking about the purples and pinks where we're talking like 6 inches or 10 inches of snowfall, I think that's going to be much more likely to be perhaps happening in the higher elevations, but maybe even not that. So just keep that in mind. Lake effect this time of year is a little bit more susceptible to do surprising things, so I'm a little bit more kind of tuned into these lake effect bands that we are seeing pop up on the models. That's a little bit more something we can begin talking about. But when we're talking about like southern New England and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, that's where we have to kind of pump the brakes, because historically these are tricky areas to forecast for models, and historically this is a little out of season. A little, not a whole lot, but it is a little bit out of season for sure. Keep that in mind. Temperatures, again, we're cooler right now. We do see things warm up briefly before we see a brief cool down for the 6th, which is Thursday, the 7th for Friday, and that's mostly for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. We do warm up for Saturday the 8th. That even lasts into Sunday the 9th for a lot of the eastern seaboard, but that's when this really intense Arctic blast starts to move down, and this one is truly impressive. Again, take note of the warmth along the west. It's very intense, very, very far stretching up to the north, and that all helps to cause a major cool down. And then we see the blues on the outside ring. That is 1 to 10 degrees below what is typical for this particular date, for your particular area, if you're in that lightest blue. And that's already pretty significant, 5 to 10 degrees below normal, especially in these darker shades. That is pretty significant. The greens is where we're starting to talk about 10 to 15 degrees below normal. Again, for your specific location on this specific date, this is 10 to 15 degrees below what is standard. These purplish blues is where we get more on the extreme side of things. 15 to 25 degrees below what is typical. We even see for some of these lower Appalachian mountains, like the Smoky Mountains, where we see the magentas, 25 degrees or more below normal, which is just crazy, crazy, crazy to think about. If your average temperature was 100, you'd be at 75. So you go from scalding hot to about room temperature, maybe just a little bit above it. So think of that difference. I always do that to put myself in perspective. That is a huge, huge difference. Or, let's take 50 degrees. If your average high is 50, you're looking at 25. That is going from, maybe I need a hoodie, down to like, I definitely need a jacket, long pants, and actually, matter of fact, I'd prefer not to be outside. So that is a huge difference. We see this roll through. Again, Monday's the big day. It rolls in Monday the 10th. Tuesday the 11th here, we see it still in full swing effect, maybe even more intense here for the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast and Deep South here. Wednesday the 12th, it's still around for the eastern seaboard, still relatively intense. And then it's mostly after that point where we do see that warmer air return, which again is why I feel like the National Weather Service with that 8 to 14 day outlook is pretty good, I feel like, because we do see us rebound with a pretty warm pattern at least for a few days after that major cool down. The GFS model here, just to get a second perspective, again, we stay cooler. We see that second one roll through for a minute, and then we get a very, very intense cool down, maybe slightly less intense than the European model. We still have those 15 to 25 degrees below normal, really, really widespread here for Monday the 10th, and that does last into, again, Tuesday the 11th, Wednesday the 12th here. So we have both major models calling for this very, very major cool down, which is the problem that I had with the 6 to 10 day outlook, which again is for the 8th through the 12th, which is like exactly when this is happening. I don't know how you see that and you say like, oh, maybe it's going to be like pretty close to normal. I'm sure we're going to get some updates from them that will align much more with the data that we're seeing. Time will tell what happens with that, but that's just my personal breakdown. We do see this model brings in another cooldown almost immediately after for the 12th, or better yet, the 14th, 15th, 16th, which is a little cooler than the European model shows. And then we do stay cooler along the East Coast. So this is a little bit more intense, at least with the longevity of our colder pattern. We're going to have to see what happens here. Obviously, after days 10, which would be about the 13th, things do get a little bit more skeptical. So that's exactly around the time frame where we start to see these models splitting off, which makes sense. That's usually why we specify that we focus on days 1 through 10, because usually these models are in conjunction, have the same idea, and it's a pretty solid idea. Then after that, you start to see them all splitting up and going crazy, and it's kind of hard to grasp onto any useful information. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. This is an example of a complete split, so we have to just consider both options until it gets a little bit closer. Now, I know I rambled. With all that being said, we do upload every single day, so be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.